Hello again, screen printers. This is Colin from Ryonet. So in our last video, our last talk, we talked about creating a dry space for drying our coated screens. And of course, dry in our dark room overall has been a concurrent theme, a running theme. For this video, I'm going to talk about actually coating a screen. But before we talk about coating a screen, I want to talk about how emulsions all vary in their consistency. And so how one coat technique, one speed doesn't always apply to every emulsion. Some emulsions are a little bit like honey. So if you coat fast, the honey, the emulsion like honey is a bit too viscous and can't cut. So you kind of hydroplane on top of the emulsion, laying down a thicker layer, where if you were to run slower, it would cut very easily and potentially lay down a much thinner deposit. Where other emulsions don't really do that. They maintain a little bit more body, a little bit more shape as you run over the mesh. So playing and watching what you're doing is very important whenever you're using a new emulsion or whenever you grab a new scoop coater and you're trying the sharp side versus the round side. Which leads us into the sharp side of your scoop coater obviously is designed to cut that emulsion a little bit more, give you a little bit more control over your emulsion deposit. And the round side is designed to kind of bullnose emulsion through your mesh a little bit more. Everything is fine. I can use both independently. It goes back to the angle of application of your scoop cutter and how much pressure you're using going forward or back. And I'll show you what I mean. So we have here our standard scoop cutter and sharp side, round side. But specifically what I want to talk about is as we actually get this here, put this up on my chest a little more, and as this slides forward, we have the opportunity to put pressure back, which allows it to cut more, or put pressure more flat or more forward, which is always going to influence how much emulsion is actually pushed through the mesh and how much is cut. So for those of us who have been coating for a while and have a good sense of touch, a good sense of feel, we can use the round side of the coater and actually get a thinner deposit than using the sharp side. Or I should say the average individual coating with the sharp side, because we can go back a little bit on our angle. We understand the flow as everything goes like this. Of course, this is for those of us coating single-handed. For those of us using two hands to coat, leaning the screen against the wall, it's all about applied pressure. Are we forward or back for how we get emulsion on our screen? So there's a lot, and where I'm going with this is there's a lot of ways to put emulsion on the screen. None of them are incorrect, but we want to make sure that there is enough emulsion down on our screen so that when we hold it into the light, I'll do this a little bit later, we can get what's called a glisten effect. We get light reflection on both sides of the emulsion. And I'll show you later why that's important and the things to look for that show you don't have enough emulsion down. So I have two scoop cutters here. One is our standard, and this is the Monster Max scoop cutter. It's a 19-inch wide. I have big hands, so for me, it's easier to use this one. I can control it easier. So I'm going to do all my coating with this one. All angles, speeds, pressures, they all apply independently. This is just my scoop coater of choice. So I'm going to be using an SBQ emulsion. This is our cryo coat. I'm just going to fill this up, not all the way, but enough to coat 5 screens. So I've got these are all 156 mesh. 2 of these are 156 standard. These are the static frames, standard mesh. And then I've got 3 of our eco frames with thin thread, hydro mesh on there. I'm gonna use these screens to talk about exposure in detail and everything that goes along with exposing the screen properly in the next video. So you're now gonna see how these are actually being coated, and it'll run on into the next one. There is a difference between coating thin thread and coating standard thread. Thin thread, as its name implies, the thread diameter is thinner than standard mesh. And as a result, that open area between the weaves, that hole, is wider. This allows everything to flow through easier. Water-based ink, plastisol, every ink substrate, but also emulsion. So you need to be more careful when you coat your screens when you have thin thread than standard, because you can put too much emulsion on there. You get a very thick stencil. And as we've talked about before, emulsion thickness is directly proportionate to your exposure time. There's also white thread versus yellow thread. Yellow thread takes 30% longer. We'll touch on that in the next video. But the thicker your emulsion layer, the longer your exposure time, the longer it takes for the light to actually penetrate through the entirety of your emulsion layer. So without ado, I'm going to coat, and I'm going to talk through what I'm doing, and I'm going to show you the glisten, and I'm going to talk about what my adjustments are for standard thread and thin thread. Using an ultimate cleanup card to scrape the edge, get all that excess off, put the lid back on, and I'm going to put this all together right here. Because I'm using a 19-inch scoop coater, and 19 is almost the entire width of the screen, this is the 20 by 24, I'm going to turn my screen this way to scoop coat. For this, I'm using very even pressure front and back, and I'm actually going to go 2 and 1. I'm going to turn it over, and I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees. So this was the top of the screen, now it's the bottom. And I did not do the greatest job. So let's see if we can show you this. A little difficult to see, but you can see some thicker parts of my stencil on the edges. It just goes back to me not being, I don't coat as often as I want anymore. So I'm a little out of practice. But that just goes back to me not being consistent with my pressure and being up and down with my force application. Let's see, can I get, there we go. At least I see it in my screen here. Right here, you can see where it's a little bit darker. Basically, I have a thicker emulsion deposit down there. So that will actually take longer to expose. But let's see if we can get the, oh, there's the, so what we're seeing, so we're seeing a pretty good glisten effect. I don't see any dull areas. And that is what's most important, because we know we have emulsion now on top of the threads and under the threads, fully encapsulating the threads, which is the most important part. If you find that you have, oh, there's a really good way to see that I have, it's too thick right there. But we're going to be fine overall, especially for what we're doing here. And it's a really good way to show that everyone makes mistakes. It's how you recover from them that really counts. having emulsion all the way wrapped around your threads is important because that's how the emulsion holds on. It's not a glue that just goes, I'm stuck, I'm fine. It actually needs a bit of a mechanical bond. It wrap around it and hold on to it. It's also, because as the squeegee comes across, it's actually abrading the emulsion, and which is also part of the reason why we need a fully exposed stencil. We need, it just goes on and on, the list goes on and on. So I'm gonna put this in my dry box that we talked about earlier, and I'm gonna keep going. Always lay your screen flat and always lay it squeegee side up. T-shirt substrate side down. We want that emulsion to settle on the bottom. That's our gasket. And as we flood, we pre-fill our stencil, squeegee cuts, and that is our ink deposit, our emulsion, our stencil thickness right there. On to the rest. All right, here we go. So I had a little difficulty starting off the coat because it's very dry in here, and I let my scoop coater sit for too long, so that bead along the edge got a little dry. But here, I don't know if we can get it on camera, I'm a little dull on this coating. You can see how I pushed harder to try and get a much more even application. And as a result, this side, the squeegee side, is just on the dull side, which means that I don't have what I would consider, and many would consider, a proper level of EOM, emulsion over mesh, kind of a mouthful. And I can end up having issues long term with a screen like this. But we wanted to show you what's going on. Here we go. Now that was with me doing average pressure from about the middle. When I go to thin thread, again because it flows through easier, I am actually going to pull back just a little bit on my angle. I'm going to rest on that edge. And again, because the emulsion flows through so easily, I'm just going to go 1 and 1. Ooh. That screen's been sitting around for a while. Let's see how it looks when we get to actually exposing this later. Two more to go. 1 and 1. Angling back onto the edge of the squeegee a little bit. Sorry, not the squeegee, the scoop coater. And you can see I'm not going too fast. I'm going just fast enough that I'm getting the emulsion to go through. I have glisten here, and I have glisten here. Oh, there go my lights. Be right back. So the lights in here are on a timer. If it senses no movement, they turn themselves off. If it senses movement, they turn themselves back on. So that was my last screen. You can see that in the corners, I was just a little bit softer. So here and here, but my others are fine. Stuff that happens when you always strive for perfection. It's something that can bug you, but it's okay. Grand scheme of things, it's just fine. And those are the 5 screens that we're going to use for our exposure test. All on 157, 156, 157. I wanted to use emulsion that is standard. I wanted to use a screen that is essentially a workhorse in our community so that we all have a generalized sense of understanding of what's going on. Many of us have used CryoCoat or other emulsions similar to this. This is an SBQ emulsion. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to put the emulsion back into the bucket, and then I'm going to clean it out, and then because I'm a little protective, I'm going to put my scoop coater back into its box so that the edge doesn't get damaged. But that's it for this video. If you have any questions, please ask. I'm here to answer everything that you've got. And we're going to continue this on with exposures, and we'll talk more about film density. I'm going to have density tests from RIP software, and we're going to talk about resolution, how to resolve detail, and all the little tips and tricks to make sure that we get a truly excellent screen. Take care. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.